Trash belongs in the dumpster, not first class. Barbara Reynolds didn't stop at words. She grabbed Zoe's designer bag and hurled it to the floor. The zipper burst open with a harsh metallic shriek. Zoe's MacBook Pro cracked against the concrete, the sound of fracturing technology slicing through the ambient terminal noise. Terminal 3 assaulted the senses. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast an unforgiving bluish-white glow that deepened the shadows under tired eyes and made even the youngest travelers look haggard. The air hung heavy with a distinctive blend of industrial cleaning products, stale coffee from the nearby kiosk, and the faint mustiness of recycled air pushed through aging ventilation systems. Zoe Thompson stumbled backward, her hoodie catching on a metal barrier. At 21 years old, dressed in faded jeans and a Stanford University hoodie, she looked like any other college student to the untrained eye. The gate passengers instinctively whipped out phones. Camera flashes popped like miniature lightning strikes, momentarily blinding in their intensity. The overhead announcement system crackled before a disembodied voice announced another departure, the words echoing and distorting as they bounced off the terminal's hard surfaces. A child wailed somewhere in the distance, the sound mingling with rolling suitcase wheels clicking rhythmically against floor tiles and the perpetual beeping of service vehicles outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Barbara planted herself between Zoe and the first-class boarding line, arms crossed like a bouncer. Her name badge gleamed under the harsh terminal lights. Barbara Reynolds, gate manager, 15 years service. The cheap polyester of her uniform jacket rustled as she shifted her weight, the fabric catching the light with an artificial sheen. Her perfume, too floral and too strong, created an invisible barrier as potent as her physical presence. The crowd thickened around them. Whispers spread through Terminal 3, like wildfire, creating a rising susurration that competed with the CNN airport network, blaring from mounted televisions. The smell of humanity intensified, a mixture of travel sweat, duty-free perfume samples, and the distinct rubber and leather scent of new luggage. Zoe's hands trembled slightly as she knelt to gather her belongings from beneath strangers' feet. The floor tiles were cool and gritty against her fingertips, embedded with months of dirt that cleaning crews could never fully remove. A presentation slide deck for the Los Angeles board meeting scattered across the floor, graphs showing quarterly profits, market expansion projections, and executive summaries marked with the SkyEdge Airlines logo. The glossy paper reflected the overhead lights in sharp glints that hurt the eyes. Have you ever been judged so harshly that strangers assumed you were a criminal just because of how you looked? The thought flashed through Zoe's mind as she collected her papers, keeping her expression neutral, despite the humiliation burning in her chest like acid. Barbara's voice boomed across Gate 42, cutting through the terminal's ambient soundtrack of announcements, conversations, and rolling luggage. Young lady, I need proof you purchased this ticket legally. Corporate policy requires additional verification for passengers like you. She drew out those last 3 words like a prosecutor delivering evidence, each syllable dripping with suspicion. The smell of fresh brewed coffee from the nearby Hudson newsstand wafted through the air, mingling incongruously with the tension. A janitor pushed his cleaning cart past the gathering crowd, the squeak of its wheels adding an almost comical counterpoint to the unfolding drama. The air conditioning kicked on with a mechanical groan, sending a sudden chill through the gate area that raised goosebumps on exposed skin. Barbara's body language screamed authority, arms locked across her chest, feet planted wide in her sensible navy pumps that squeaked slightly against the polished floor. Her breath smelled of peppermint gum, an unsuccessful attempt to mask the stale coffee underneath. The departure board overhead flickered ominously, the LED display momentarily scrambling before resolving into clear text. Flight 847 to Los Angeles. Final boarding 10 minutes. The digital countdown pulsed with urgency each minute that ticked away, heightening the tension in the gate area. Barbara positioned herself directly in Zoe's path to first-class boarding, creating a human barricade that forced other passengers to navigate around the spectacle. Her gray suit jacket, standard SkyEdge Airlines management attire, seemed to expand with her inflated sense of power. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, deepening the lines of suspicion around her eyes. Zoe rose slowly from collecting her scattered belongings, her worn leather portfolio clutched against her chest. The gold embossing caught the light briefly, the subtle ZT monogram barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Most passengers didn't notice the elegant script, but a few business travelers squinted at the unfamiliar logo, wondering. "My name is Zoe Thompson," she said quietly, pronouncing each syllable with deliberate clarity. "Not Zoe, as you keep saying." Her voice remained level, a skill honed in countless board meetings where she was often the youngest and only black woman at the table. Barbara's smirk widened, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of her eyes. "Don't get an attitude with me, Miss Thompson. I've been managing this gate for 15 years. I know suspicious behavior when I see it." The word suspicious hung in the air like an accusation, an all-too-familiar code word Zoe had heard throughout her life. 30 feet away, passenger Maria Gonzalez fumbled with her phone, opening Facebook Live with trembling fingers. "Y'all are not going to believe the discrimination happening at JFK right now," she whispered into the camera, her dark eyes wide with disbelief. The viewer count started at 0, then climbed 12, 23, 47 viewers. Comments began flooding the stream. "What airline is this? Get their badge numbers. Someone call corporate." The digital display above the gate blinked. Flight 847. Los Angeles. Boarding, 9 minutes remaining. Zoe pulled out her boarding pass, hands steady despite the growing crowd. The first-class ticket showed seat 2A, the window seat she always preferred for cross-country flights. She'd booked it herself through the executive portal, the same way she had for the past 3 years, since becoming chief operating officer at 18. Barbara snatched the boarding pass, examining it like a forensic expert hunting for forgeries. She held it up to the light, squinting at the barcode. "First class. Huh? That's convenient." She waved the pass theatrically for the growing audience. "Let me see the credit card you used to purchase this ticket." "That's not standard protocol," Zoe replied, her voice never rising above conversational level. Years of boardroom negotiations had taught her that volume rarely equaled authority. "But if you insist." She opened her wallet carefully, revealing a glimpse of platinum plastic, and something else, a small family photo tucked behind her ID. The image showed Zoe smiling beside an elegant black woman in a sharp business suit, but Barbara was too focused on the credit card to notice the SkyEdge Airlines logo in the background. 8 minutes left. SkyEdge Platinum Reserve. Barbara held the card up to the light, as if checking for counterfeits. Interesting choice for someone your age. How exactly does a college student afford a card with a $550 annual fee? Zoe's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only visible sign of her growing frustration. She glanced at her watch, a Patek Philippe Calatrava in rose gold, clearly not a knockoff, and muttered something under her breath. "Excuse me." Barbara leaned closer, sensing weakness. "I said my mother's flight should be landing soon." Zoe's tone remained measured, professional. "She'll be interested to hear about SkyEdge's customer service standards." Barbara laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the gate area. "Oh, so now, Mommy's going to come save you." What's she going to do? Complain to corporate. The irony hung in the air, invisible to everyone except Zoe. Maria's live stream had grown to 312 viewers. The comments were getting heated. "This is disgusting. Sue them. Hashtag airport discrimination. She's handling this better than I would," wrote one viewer. But some voices supported Barbara. She's just doing her job. Security protocols exist for a reason. A businessman in an expensive suit glanced up from his laptop, frowning at the commotion. Two teenage girls recorded the interaction on their phones, giggling nervously. An elderly couple exchanged troubled looks, the woman clutching her husband's arm, as if seeking reassurance that travel hadn't always been this hostile. Zoe methodically photographed Barbara's badge with her phone, capturing the name and employee number. Then she opened her voice recorder app. For the record, I'm documenting this interaction. Ms. Reynolds, could you state your full name and position for my report? Your report. Barbara's eyebrows shot up perfectly, plucked arches disappearing beneath her blonde bangs. Who exactly are you planning to report to? I am the authority here. 6 minutes left. The gate area had transformed into an impromptu theater with Zoe and Barbara at center stage. First-class passengers checked their watches impatiently. Families with young children pressed closer, the parents torn between wanting to shield their kids from conflict and using the moment as a teaching opportunity about injustice. Maria's live stream viewer count hit 415 comments, pouring in faster than anyone could read. Someone tagged SkyEdge Airlines' official account. A local news reporter who followed the airline's hashtag noticed the commotion and forwarded the link to her producer. #JFK discrimination began trending locally on Twitter. Ma'am, I'd just like to board my flight, Zoe said, maintaining her composure. I have a meeting in Los Angeles this evening that I cannot miss. Well, you should have thought about that before trying to sneak into first class, Barbara replied, her tone dripping with condescension. Economy boarding hasn't even started yet. Security Officer Thomas Wilson approached his radio, crackling with distant chatter. His hand rested casually on his belt, a subtle threat that didn't go unnoticed by the growing crowd of spectators. Problem here, Barbara. His tone suggested this wasn't his first time backing up her authority. At 42, Thomas had spent 15 years patrolling airport terminals, automatically siding with staff over passengers in most disputes. Just a passenger who thinks rules don't apply to her, Barbara replied, gesturing dismissively at Zoe. Claims she has a first-class ticket, but something doesn't add up. Zoe looked directly at the security officer. I'd like the contact number for SkyEdge Airlines, corporate customer service, please, and your name and badge number for my documentation. Her voice remained steady, but those who looked closely might notice the slight tension in her shoulders, the only visible sign of stress in her otherwise composed demeanor. Thomas hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with being recorded. Zoe's phone was still capturing everything, and Maria's live stream now had nearly 500 viewers watching the confrontation unfold in real time. Look, Miss Thomas, began, his tone softening slightly. We just need to verify your ticket. It's standard procedure. For whom? Zoe asked pointedly. I've flown first class on this route 17 times in the past year. This is the first time I've been asked to prove I paid for my ticket. Barbara scoffed. 17 times. In first class at your age, with what money? Zoe's portfolio slipped slightly, revealing a corner of what looked like official letterhead visible for just a moment, before she adjusted her grip. Nobody caught the significance, except one sharp-eyed business traveler who did a double-take, squinting at the partially visible SkyEdge Airlines executive logo. The gate area buzzed with tension. Passengers checked their own phones, some joining Maria's live stream, others texting friends about the drama. The story was already beginning to spread beyond the physical space of Terminal 3. 5 minutes left. I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal, Zoe said quietly, especially not by the airline. She stopped herself mid-sentence, taking a deep breath. The airline I've flown with for years. Barbara narrowed her eyes, sensing the near slip, but unable to identify what Zoe had almost revealed. If you've flown so much, then you know security is our priority. I'm just following protocol. Which protocol specifically allows you to throw a passenger's belongings on the floor? Zoe asked, her voice finally taking on an edge. Is that in the SkyEdge customer service handbook? Thomas shifted uncomfortably, realizing belatedly that Barbara might have overstepped. Ma'am, did you actually? She was trying to push past me. Barbara interrupted. I simply blocked her path and she dropped her bag. That's not true, called a voice from the crowd. Maria had stepped closer, her phone still broadcasting live. I saw the whole thing. She threw the bag on purpose. Barbara's face flushed. You need to stop recording right now. Photography is prohibited in secure areas. Actually, Zoe interjected calmly. SkyEdge Airlines' own policy, 328, 7 states, that passengers may record interactions with staff for quality assurance purposes, provided no restricted security equipment is captured. There are no such restrictions at this gate. Barbara blinked rapidly, clearly surprised by Zoe's knowledge of airline regulations. How would you know our internal policies? Zoe checked her watch again, a small smile ghosting across her lips. Keep recording, she told Maria quietly. This is about to get very interesting. Assistant Manager Heather Davis emerged from the back office like a shark smelling blood in the water. Her polyester blazer and plastic smile screamed middle management desperation. What seems to be the issue here? Heather's voice carried the practiced tone of someone who'd attended every corporate de-escalation seminar, but learned nothing about actual human decency. Barbara straightened, energized by backup. Suspicious passenger. Claims she belongs in first class. But look at her. She gestured at Zoe's hoodie and jeans like they were evidence in court. Something's not right. The digital countdown mocked them all. Flight 847. Boarding closes 4 minutes. Maria's Facebook Live exploded with activity. Viewer count 623, 782, 947. Comments streamed faster than she could read. This is insane. Get their names. Someone tagged the airline. JFK discrimination trending on Twitter. But the support wasn't universal. Maybe she is suspicious. They're just doing their jobs. Why doesn't she just cooperate? Zoe pulled out her phone, scrolling to a contact marked simply, Security, and hit dial. She spoke quietly, professionally. Hi, this is Zoe. I need you to review footage from Terminal 3 Gate 42 for the last 15 minutes. Yes, I'll hold. Barbara's eyes narrowed. Who are you calling? You can't just, I'm documenting everything. Zoe interrupted calmly. Standard protocol when filing discrimination complaints. 3 minutes left. The crowd thickened like gathering storm clouds. Business travelers checked their watches impatiently. Families with children pressed closer, sensing drama. 3 teenagers held up phones, turning the humiliation into content for their social feeds. Security Officer Wilson shifted nervously, his radio crackling with distant chatter about passenger situations and potential delays. His supervisor's voice cut through the static. Handle it quickly. Thomas, we've got senators flying out of Terminal 2. Heather stepped forward, her smile stretching wider and more artificial. Miss Thompson was it. We just need to verify your ticket purchase. Surely you understand we have security protocols for passengers like me. Zoe's voice remained level, but her eyes hardened. Please clarify what you mean by that. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Heather's smile flickered. An announcement echoed through the terminal. SkyEdge Airlines Flight 203 from Atlanta has arrived at Gate 15. Zoe checked her expensive Patek Philippe again. A timepiece worth more than Barbara's monthly salary, though nobody seemed to notice the luxury hiding in plain sight. Perfect timing, she murmured. 2 minutes left. Barbara grabbed the gate microphone with theatrical authority. Her voice boomed across the entire boarding area. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a passenger situation requiring additional security screening. Flight 847 boarding will be delayed while we resolve safety concerns. The announcement hit like a bomb. Passengers groaned. Business travelers started making angry phone calls. Parents with cranky toddlers shot daggers at Zoe, the presumed cause of their misery. Maria's live stream viewer count exploded 247 watching live. The comment section became a war zone. Sue them all. This is America in 2024. Boycott SkyEdge Airlines. Others pushed back. She brought this on herself. A flight attendant appeared confusion written across her face. Barbara, what's the holdup? We need to close the door. Security situation. Barbara announced importantly. This passenger needs additional screening before we can allow boarding. Zoe stood in the eye of the hurricane, surrounded by hostile faces and pointing cameras. She appeared completely isolated, a young woman in casual clothes, facing down the entire airline authority structure. But she wasn't panicking. If anything, she seemed to be waiting for something or someone. 1 minute left. Thomas moved closer, hand hovering near his restraints. Miss, we need you to come with us for secondary screening. Company policy. Whose company? Zoe asked quietly. The question seemed odd, almost nonsensical. Thomas frowned. Heather's smile faltered completely. Even Barbara looked momentarily confused by the strange response. Zoe's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and that mysterious smile grew wider. Actually, she said, tucking her phone away, I think we should wait just a moment longer. There's someone who should witness this conversation. 30 seconds left. The boarding area fell into a strange electric silence. Something in Zoe's tone had shifted. Not louder, not angrier, but somehow more confident, more certain. Barbara sensed the change and didn't like it. We don't have time for games, little girl. Security is removing you from this gate area right now. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Zoe said softly. The words carried an authority that seemed impossible from someone who'd just been humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Heather took an unconscious step backward. Thomas's hand dropped from his belt. Maria zoomed her camera closer, sensing something big was about to happen. Her viewers felt it too. The comment stream paused as 500 people held their collective breath. The sound of confident heels clicking against terminal tiles echoed from the corridor. Sharp, purposeful steps that seemed to cut through the chaos like a sword. Zoe straightened her shoulders. The helpless victim was disappearing, replaced by someone else entirely. That would be my ride, she said quietly, no longer looking at Barbara, but past her toward the approaching sound. The clicking grew louder, closer. Boarding time expired. Flight 847 remained at the gate. Barbara turned toward the sound, irritation flashing across her face. Now what? If this is some kind of... She stopped mid-sentence. Her face went white. The entire gate area seemed to hold its breath as a figure emerged from the corridor, and Zoe Thompson's impossible calm finally made perfect sense. Zoe opened her worn leather portfolio with deliberate precision. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording every movement. Inside the weathered folder lay credentials that would shatter everything Barbara Reynolds thought she knew about power. She removed a single business card, thick, expensive cardstock, with embossed lettering, and placed it silently in Barbara's trembling hand. The card read, Zoe Thompson, Chief Operating Officer, SkyEdge Airlines Group. Time seemed to freeze. Barbara's face drained of all color, her confident smirk dissolving into shock. Security Officer Wilson's hand dropped from his radio like dead weight. Assistant Manager Heather Davis's plastic smile cracked completely. Maria's Facebook Live erupted in chaos. Viewer count spiked past 2,000 as comments exploded. Holy plot twist of the century. She's the COO. Barbara is so fired. Miss Reynolds, Zoe said quietly, her voice carrying new authority. I believe you requested additional verification. Here's mine. She produced her corporate ID badge, the one that had been hidden beneath her hoodie all along. The SkyEdge Airlines logo gleamed under the harsh terminal lights, along with her title and security clearance level, granting her access to every gate, every flight, every employee record in the company. Barbara stared at the credentials, like they were written in a foreign language. I don't... This can't be. Zoe reached into her portfolio again, pulling out an executive travel authorization and a board meeting agenda stamped with Monday's date. Each document bore the official company seal and her signature approval. I'm traveling to our Los Angeles headquarters for quarterly board meetings. Zoe explained, her tone shifting from defensive to professional. I dress comfortably for long flights. My mother's CEO, Olivia Thompson, expects my arrival report by midnight. The name hit the crowd like lightning. Business travelers whipped out phones frantically Googling. Olivia Thompson's face appeared on screen after screen. Forbes covers Wall Street Journal. Profiles. Aviation industry magazines. One of the most powerful women in American business. Barbara's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Your mother is the CEO. Zoe confirmed. She should be arriving from her Atlanta board meetings right about now. Would you like to explain your customer service philosophy directly to her? The approaching footsteps grew louder, sharp, confident heels that commanded attention. The crowd began turning toward the sound, sensing something monumental approaching. Zoe's transformation was complete. Gone was the helpless young woman in casual clothes. In her place stood a corporate executive who'd been conducting an unintentional audit of her own company's discrimination practices. For a brief moment, Zoe's mind flashed back to her first experience with discrimination in an airport. She'd been just 16, traveling alone to a mathematics competition. A gate agent had insisted her ticket must be forged because scholarships don't cover first class. Her mother had arrived then too, but Zoe had promised herself that one day she'd handle these situations on her own terms. Today was that day. Security's panic was immediate. Wilson stepped forward, his demeanor completely changed. Ma'am, we didn't know. Is there anything we can do to assist you? Zoe's eyes never left Barbara's face. Yes, I need the security footage from the last 20 minutes and incident reports from everyone involved in this interaction. Heather tried to salvage the situation, her voice cracking with false cheerfulness. Miss Thompson, surely we can work this out internally. No need for reports or... There's every need. Zoe interrupted smoothly. This incident was live-streamed to over 2,000 viewers and documented by multiple passengers. SkyEdge Airlines' response will be public, whether we want it to be or not. The live stream explosion continued. Maria's stream had become a phenomenon. Viewer count 847 and climbing rapidly. Major news outlets were already reaching out through the comments. CNN here. Can we interview you? TMZ wants to license this footage. Fox News requesting comment. CEO. Mom and hashtag SkyEdge discrimination were trending nationally. Other passengers in the terminal had joined the stream, creating a multi-angle documentation of the unfolding corporate crisis. Zoe continued her strategic revelation. Ms. Reynolds, in my 3 years as Chief Operating Officer, I've been reviewing customer complaints about discrimination in our system. Your name appears in 14 separate incidents over the past 18 months. Barbara's face somehow went even whiter. Those complaints were... 8 of them specifically involved passengers of color. Zoe's tone remained conversational, but each fact landed like a hammer blow. The legal department estimates our liability exposure at $2.3 million in potential settlements. The approaching footsteps were almost upon them now. Zoe glanced toward the corridor with anticipation rather than anxiety. "I suggest you prepare your explanation," Zoe told Barbara quietly. "My mother doesn't appreciate being kept waiting, and she especially doesn't appreciate employees who make her company look bad on social media." Barbara followed Zoe's gaze toward the sound of approaching authority. Her entire body began to shake as the reality of her situation crystallized. She hadn't just discriminated against a random passenger. She'd humiliated the COO of her own company, broadcast it to thousands of viewers, and was about to face the CEO personally. The crowd's realization spread through the gate area like wildfire. Passengers pulled up Olivia Thompson's Wikipedia page on their phones, sharing images and net worth calculations. Business travelers, who'd initially supported Barbara's security protocols, now desperately deleted their social media comments. The teenagers who'd been filming for entertainment suddenly realized they were documenting corporate history in the making. "One more thing, Miss Reynolds," Zoe said, checking her Patek Philippe watch again. "This wasn't entirely accidental. We've received 17 complaints about discrimination at this specific gate over the past 6 months. I was conducting an informal assessment of our customer service standards. The implication hit like a freight train. This hadn't been random. It was corporate oversight that had exposed systemic problems." "So, in a way," Zoe continued with devastating calm, "you've been extremely helpful. You've provided a perfect case study in exactly the behavior we're working to eliminate from SkyEdge Airlines." The sound of heels stopped just outside the gate area. A figure appeared in the corridor, tall, commanding, unmistakably powerful even from a distance. Zoe straightened her shoulders one final time. "Mom's here." Olivia Thompson entered Gate 42 like a force of nature sweeping through a boardroom full of incompetent executives. At 52, she commanded attention without demanding it. Her tailored navy Armani suit fit perfectly across her athletic frame, each line crafted to project authority. Diamond earrings caught the harsh terminal lights, sparking like warnings. Her stride spoke of boardrooms, conquered billion-dollar decisions made before breakfast, and competitors crushed with elegant precision. 3 executives flanked her: James Miller and Sarah Rodriguez, carrying leather portfolios, and a woman with a tablet already open to what looked like legal documents. Behind them, 2 corporate security personnel swept the area with professional eyes, noting exits, camera angles, and potential threats to their CEO's reputation. The crowd recognized her immediately. Phones emerged like paparazzi cameras as passengers snapped photos of one of America's most powerful CEOs, walking directly into their viral discrimination drama. Business travelers who'd been complaining about delays suddenly straightened their ties, hoping for LinkedIn-worthy selfies. "Zoe, darling." Olivia's voice carried across the sudden silence, warm honey laced with steel. "I received your message during my Atlanta meetings. I see we've developed quite a situation here." Zoe stepped forward, her transformation from victim to executive now complete in her mother's commanding presence. The helpless young woman in the hoodie had vanished entirely, replaced by a corporate leader who'd inherited both her mother's intelligence and her ruthless business instincts. "Mom, I'd like you to meet Miss Barbara Reynolds, our Terminal 3 gate manager with 15 years of service." Zoe's tone carried surgical irony. "She's been providing me with an extremely thorough demonstration of our current customer service protocols." The subtle emphasis on current wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. Changes were coming, and Barbara had just volunteered herself as the catalyst. Olivia's laser focus shifted to Barbara, who stood frozen like prey caught in a predator's gaze. The gate manager's earlier confidence had evaporated completely, replaced by the dawning horror of someone who'd just realized they'd attacked a shark's cub in front of the entire ocean. "Miss Reynolds." Olivia's voice could have cut glass. "I'm Olivia Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of SkyEdge Airlines. I understand you've been assisting my daughter with her travel arrangements tonight. Barbara's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The business card she'd been clutching, Zoe's COO credentials, fluttered to the floor like a dying leaf, landing among the scattered contents of the bag she'd so violently dumped 20 minutes earlier. Mrs. Thompson, Barbara finally found her voice, though it emerged as a pathetic whisper. There was a misunderstanding. I was following protocol for suspicious stop. Olivia raised one perfectly manicured hand. Before you dig yourself deeper, I suggest you listen. Barbara fell silent immediately, her body visibly trembling. James Miller stepped forward with practiced efficiency, tablet glowing with prepared data. Ma'am, we've completed the preliminary review you requested during your flight from Atlanta. Olivia nodded without breaking eye contact with Barbara. Her gaze was surgical, dissecting every micro-expression of guilt and panic crossing the gate manager's face. Please share our findings with everyone present. Transparency is crucial when addressing systematic failures in our organization. Miller's voice carried across the gate area, clearly audible to Maria's live stream and its growing audience of 247 viewers. Miss Barbara Reynolds. Employee identification number 7190734 has been involved in 14 documented customer service incidents over the past 18 months. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Passengers began recording on multiple phones, creating a surreal forest of cameras, documenting Olivia's corporate response in real time. 8 of these incidents, Miller continued with devastating precision, specifically involved discrimination complaints filed by passengers of color. 3 resulted in formal legal challenges. Our risk assessment department estimates potential liability exposure at $2.3 million in pending settlements. Barbara's face had gone from pale to gray. She looked like she might vomit. This evening's incident, Miller concluded, live-streamed to thousands of viewers and documented by multiple witnesses, represents significant additional reputational damage to SkyEdge Airlines' brand equity. Yet the CEO's professional fury was just beginning. Olivia stepped closer to Barbara, her heels clicking against the terminal floor like a countdown timer. Each step seemed to diminish Barbara's authority further. Ms. Reynolds, in my 23 years building this airline from a small regional carrier into an $8.7 billion international company, I have never, and I mean never, been more embarrassed by an employee's conduct. Her voice remained perfectly modulated, but the fury underneath was molten steel, barely contained by professional courtesy. You didn't simply discriminate against a random passenger tonight. You discriminated against my daughter, your chief operating officer, the woman who helped design our current operational protocols, and who sits on our executive board. Olivia's voice grew colder with each revelation. You broadcast your prejudice to thousands of people. You cost this company its reputation. You humiliated my family. She leaned closer, dropping her voice, just enough that Barbara had to strain to hear a power move taught in executive leadership courses. And worst of all, you did it with such casual cruelty that it's clear this wasn't aberrant behavior. This was Tuesday evening for you. Behind Olivia, Sarah Rodriguez was already drafting emergency press releases on her tablet. James Miller was coordinating with legal about termination procedures. The security team had positioned themselves strategically to prevent Barbara from fleeing if she panicked. Barbara's desperate defense finally emerged. Mrs. Thompson, please. I didn't know who she was. The system didn't flag her as executive staff. She was dressed so casually, and we have security protocols for suspicious passengers. Stop. Olivia's single word cut through Barbara's excuses like a blade through silk. Just stop talking before you make this worse for yourself. She turned to address the crowd, ensuring her words carried to every phone camera and live stream viewer. What you're hearing is exactly the problem. Ms. Reynolds assumed my daughter was suspicious because she saw a young black woman in comfortable clothes and decided she couldn't possibly belong in first class. Olivia's media training showed in every gesture, every perfectly modulated phrase designed for maximum impact across social platforms. She never properly verified Zoe's credentials. She never followed standard passenger assistance protocols. She made assumptions based purely on racial bias, and then doubled down when challenged. In the background, Heather Davis tried to inch away from the unfolding disaster, but Sarah Rodriguez caught her eye and subtly shook her head. No one was escaping accountability tonight. Thomas Wilson had already been quietly pulled aside by one of the corporate security officers, his badge and radio temporarily confiscated, while his involvement was assessed. Zoe stood slightly behind her mother, her posture reflecting years of training in corporate presence. She maintained perfect composure, though those who looked closely might notice the slight tremor in her hands, the only visible sign of the emotional toll this public humiliation had taken. Olivia turned back to her security team with military precision. "Ms. Reynolds, your employment with SkyEdge Airlines is terminated immediately effective this moment. Please surrender your badge access cards and any company property in your possession." Barbara's legs nearly buckled. 15 years of employment, pension contributions, health benefits, all evaporating in the harsh fluorescent light of Terminal 3. "You can't do this," Barbara stammered. "I have seniority rights union protection. My pension." "You forfeited those considerations," Olivia replied without a trace of emotion. "When you chose discrimination over dignity, when you chose humiliation over hospitality, when you chose to represent my company's values with such spectacular failure that it required CEO intervention." James Miller stepped forward with prepared documentation. "Miss Reynolds' termination for cause eliminates severance pay and impacts pension vesting. You'll receive information about COBRA health coverage continuation, but company contributions end today." The crowd had fallen into stunned silence, witnessing corporate accountability unfold with unprecedented transparency. Many passengers were texting friends and family about witnessing the airport Karen takedown of the century. Maria's live stream had reached 4,125 viewers, her hands trembling as she captured what was quickly becoming a case study in crisis management and leadership. Barbara clutched her employee badge like it was a lifeline, her knuckles white. "Please," her voice broke. "I have a son in college. I can't lose my insurance. I've given 15 years to this company. And in 15 minutes, you've undone all of that," Olivia replied. "Actions have consequences. Ms. Reynolds, this is yours." Zoe stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her mother's arm, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes about their professional dynamic. Olivia yielded the spotlight to her daughter with visible pride. This wasn't rescue. This was empowerment. This was a masterclass in family business successions. "Reynolds," Zoe said, her voice now carrying the full authority of her executive position. "While your actions tonight were personally hurtful, they've also provided valuable insight into systematic problems within our customer service structure." She addressed the crowd and cameras with the confidence of someone born for leadership. "This incident will serve as a catalyst for comprehensive organizational change throughout SkyEdge Airlines operations." Zoe's transformation was complete. Gone was any trace of the humiliated young woman from 30 minutes ago. In her place stood a corporate executive who'd turned personal attack into company-wide reform opportunity. Flight attendants had gathered at the gate entrance, watching wide-eyed as their company's top executives conducted an impromptu restructuring in front of passengers. The captain of Flight 847 had emerged from the cockpit, observing from a distance, but making no attempt to intervene. Barbara slowly removed her SkyEdge badge, her fingers trembling so badly she dropped it twice before finally surrendering it to James Miller. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. "That's not our concern," Miller replied quietly. Human resources will contact you tomorrow with separation paperwork. Until then, you're required to leave company property immediately. The corporate security team moved forward, prepared to escort Barbara from the terminal if necessary. Thomas Wilson had already been relieved of duty, pending investigation, his temporary replacement already managing the security checkpoint with heightened awareness of customer treatment. Olivia and Zoe worked in perfect tandem, demonstrating the family business partnership that had built their airline empire from regional carrier to industry giant. Effective. Monday morning. Olivia announced to the crowd and cameras, SkyEdge Airlines is allocating $15 million for comprehensive bias prevention initiatives across all domestic and international operations. The number sent ripples through the crowd. This wasn't corporate damage control. This was systematic transformation with real financial commitment. Zoe continued seamlessly, her voice projecting executive confidence. Every customer-facing employee, from gate agents to flight attendants to ground crews, will complete mandatory bias, recognition, and prevention certification within 60 days. We are installing AI-powered interaction monitoring systems at every gate. Olivia added to identify problematic behavior patterns before they escalate to discrimination incidents. Monthly audits by independent civil rights organizations, Zoe concluded, will ensure compliance and provide transparency to our passengers and shareholders. Barbara stood paralyzed, watching as her career imploded in real time, while the company she'd served for 15 years reorganized itself before her eyes, all because she'd made assumptions about a young black woman in casual clothes. Patricia's voice softened slightly as she looked at Zoe, allowing maternal pride to show through her CEO armor. This isn't just business policy revision. This is deeply personal. She turned back to the crowd and cameras. My daughter earned her Chief Operating Officer position through merit, not family connections. MBA from Wharton at 21. 5 years of operational experience, starting in baggage handling and working up through every department. The respect of our board of directors based on performance metrics, not birthright. Zoe nodded, adding with quiet strength. What happened to me tonight happens to countless passengers who don't have corporate credentials to protect them, who don't have CEO mothers to call for backup. That's why these systematic changes matter far beyond my personal experience. Maria's Facebook Live had exploded into a cultural phenomenon. Viewer count 6,912 and climbing exponentially as shares multiplied across platforms. Major news outlets were already running breaking news segments. CEO Mom, #SkyEdge, accountability, and #airport justice were trending worldwide. Comments flooded in from 6 continents. This is how you handle corporate discrimination. Family business goals. Other airlines scrambling to review policies. Olivia Thompson should run for president. Zoe Thompson is the future of business leadership. Olivia's phone buzzed constantly with calls from competitors, board members, shareholders, and international news organizations. She glanced at caller ID CEOs from Delta, American, and United, requesting emergency conference calls to discuss industry-wide discrimination policy reviews. The aviation industry is watching this live stream, Olivia told the crowd with strategic awareness. What SkyEdge Airlines does in response to tonight's incident will establish new standards for customer service accountability across all major carriers. Her words weren't just corporate speak. They were a declaration of industry leadership through crisis transformation. As corporate security prepared Barbara's escort from the premises, Olivia delivered one final message with surgical precision. Ms. Reynolds, you'll receive comprehensive information about bias prevention training programs available in our industry. Completion will be required for any future aviation employment, Zoe added quietly but audibly. There will also be a public apology video required, not to us personally, but to every passenger who has ever been made to feel unwelcome in an airport because of how they look. The gate area buzzed with electric energy as passengers processed what they'd witnessed, not just a discrimination incident and corporate response, but a masterclass in leadership, family unity, and systematic change implementation. Olivia put her arm around Zoe's shoulders. For just one moment, they weren't CEO and COO. They were simply mother and daughter standing together against injustice, with the full weight of corporate power backing their moral authority. Now, Olivia said, checking her own expensive Patek Philippe watch, I believe we both have flights to catch and a company to reform. Barbara had not always been the person who would throw a passenger's belongings on the floor. 15 years earlier, she joined SkyEdge Airlines as a check-in agent, grateful for the stable job, after her husband Mark abandoned her and their 3-year-old son Marcus. The airline had offered structure benefits, and most importantly, a community where she felt respected after months of personal humiliation. Her transformation began 7 years into her career. Barbara had been a model employee, 4-time recipient of the monthly Customer Service Award, consistently positive reviews, even featured in the company newsletter for helping an elderly passenger during a medical emergency. Then came the Fletcher incident. James Fletcher, SkyEdge's then VP of Operations, had implemented new security protocols following a series of fraud cases where passengers used stolen credit cards for first-class tickets. The directive, never officially documented, but clearly communicated, encouraged gate agents to be additionally vigilant about passengers who didn't fit the typical profile for premium cabins. During her first week implementing these protocols, Barbara had stopped a young man in casual clothes attempting to board in first class. Following Fletcher's guidance, she'd requested additional verification beyond his boarding pass. The passenger had become indignant, demanded her supervisor, and threatened to sue. When her station manager arrived, he'd immediately recognized the passenger, the son of a major SkyEdge investor. Barbara was reprimanded, written up for poor judgment, and nearly terminated. Fletcher, who had personally trained her on the new protocols just days earlier, denied ever suggesting profiling passengers. You misunderstood, he'd said during her disciplinary hearing. We would never encourage discriminatory practices. This was a serious lapse in judgment on your part. Barbara had survived professionally, but something fundamental had shifted. The company she'd trusted had sacrificed her to protect itself. The clear message enforcing unwritten rules was expected, but getting caught meant you'd be blamed, while executives remained unscathed. Over the subsequent years, she'd internalized a complex set of lessons. Better to be overly cautious than embarrassed by fraud. Passengers who looked the part rarely caused problems. Those who didn't fit the typical profile deserved extra scrutiny. Documentation protected you. Verbal directives could be denied. She'd built a wall of procedural righteousness around herself, convinced that she was simply maintaining standards that protected the airline and legitimate passengers. Each time her heightened scrutiny identified an actual issue, a misplaced boarding pass, a seating confusion, it reinforced her approach. Barbara never thought of herself as prejudiced. She simply believed she had developed an operational intuition about who belonged where. That this intuition disproportionately flagged young passengers of color never registered as a pattern in her consciousness. The morning of the Gate 42 incident, Barbara had received another piece of disheartening news. Marcus, now 18 and a freshman at SUNY Buffalo, had called to say his scholarship had been reduced due to budget cuts. The remaining tuition, $4,700 per semester, would need to come from Barbara's already stretched finances. I can pick up more shifts at the campus store, Marcus had offered, though they both knew it wouldn't be enough. We'll figure it out. Barbara had promised, the weight of single motherhood feeling heavier than usual. Your education comes first. She'd arrived at JFK distracted and stressed, the financial pressure adding to her usual hypervigilance about maintaining order at her gate. When she spotted Zoe Thompson, young black, dressed casually, attempting to enter the first-class line, all her internal alarms had triggered simultaneously. Here was an opportunity to demonstrate her value, protecting the airline from potential fraud, while maintaining the standards that premium passengers expected. The fact that her intervention might impress the supervisors who controlled overtime assignments, overtime she desperately needed for Marcus's tuition, wasn't consciously calculated, but it certainly influenced her aggressive approach. Barbara Reynolds wasn't a cartoonish villain. She was a woman who had learned the wrong lessons from a system that quietly encouraged discrimination, while officially denouncing it, a middle manager caught between corporate doublespeak and financial precarity, who had convinced herself that her biases were actually insights. This didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained how a person who had once been compassionate enough to be featured in the company newsletter had transformed into someone who would throw a passenger's belongings on the floor without hesitation or remorse, until suddenly faced with the consequences of her actions in the form of Olivia and Zoe Thompson. The full weight of what she had become finally crashed down upon her. The corporate jet reached cruising altitude, the cabin quiet except for the gentle hum of engines. Olivia Thompson had fallen asleep after 20 hours of crisis management, her tablet still displaying draft policies for the Thompson Protocol. In the private bathroom at the rear of the aircraft, Zoe Thompson finally allowed herself to break. Her hands shook as she splashed cold water on her face. The mirror reflected a composed professional 21-year-old COO, but her eyes told a different story. They brimmed with tears she'd been suppressing since the moment Barbara Reynolds threw her bag on the terminal floor. "Don't you dare cry," she whispered to her reflection. "Not now. Not after holding it together this long." But the dam had broken. 6 hours of maintaining perfect composure through public humiliation, corporate strategy sessions, and media management had taken its toll. Her shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. All the training, all the preparation for handling discrimination couldn't eliminate the raw hurt of being treated like she didn't belong, like she was less than human in front of hundreds of witnesses. The professional mask slipped, revealing the young woman beneath the executive title. Zoe slid down against the wall, hugging her knees to her chest. For 2 minutes, she allowed herself exactly 2 minutes. She let the pain flow through her. The humiliation. The familiar weight of being seen as other despite her accomplishments. The bone-deep exhaustion of constantly having to prove herself worthy of spaces others entered without question. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Zoe, are you all right?" Olivia's voice still groggy from sleep. Zoe quickly wiped her eyes. "Fine, Mom. Just freshening up." A pause. "May I come in?" Zoe hesitated, then unlocked the door. One look at her daughter's face told Olivia everything. "Oh, sweetheart." She stepped inside, closing the door and sitting beside Zoe on the floor. CEO Olivia Thompson in her tailored suit, sitting on an airplane bathroom floor to comfort her daughter. "I'm sorry," Zoe whispered. "I've been holding it together, but—" "You don't need to apologize for being human," Olivia interrupted gently. "What happened today was traumatic. You're allowed to feel it." "I can't afford to feel it," Zoe argued, wiping furiously at her eyes. "I'm the COO. I need to be strategic, not emotional." Olivia took her daughter's hands. "Listen to me. The strength you showed today wasn't in not feeling hurt. It was in using that hurt constructively instead of destructively. There's no contradiction between feeling pain and creating change." Zoe leaned her head against her mother's shoulder, something she hadn't done since high school. "I keep thinking about all the people who experience this without having what I have, the position, the platform, the proof. What happens to them? That's why we're doing this," Olivia said softly. "Not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel they don't belong." They sat in silence for a moment. CEO and COO temporarily just mother and daughter. You know what scared me most? Zoe finally admitted. For a split second when she threw my bag down, I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to lose control completely. Everything you taught me about strategic response almost went out the window. Olivia nodded. But it didn't. You chose dignity over rage, documentation over drama. That's not because you didn't feel the rage, it's because you channeled it towards something more powerful. How do you do this? Zoe asked. 23 years building an airline in an industry dominated by white men. How do you handle the constant everything? Olivia smiled sadly. Who says I do? Remember when I fired that board member who kept calling me young lady in meetings? Zoe actually laughed. You didn't just fire him. You bought his company 6 months later and dissolved it. Strategic response. Olivia winked. Channel the rage, don't eliminate it. Zoe took a deep breath, composing herself. The vulnerable moment had passed, but something had shifted. She'd allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened, and somehow that made it easier to carry. 2 more hours until Los Angeles. Olivia said, checking her watch, ready to get back to revolutionizing an industry. Zoe stood splashing water on her face one more time. When she looked in the mirror now, both the professional COO and the human beneath were visible, not in conflict, but in harmony. Let's make sure what happened today never happens to anyone else, she said. Together, they returned to the main cabin, mother and daughter, CEO and COO united. Not just by business strategy, but by shared purpose, forged through shared pain. 3 months after the Gate 42 incident, Maria Gonzalez faced a crisis of confidence. Sitting in her office late one evening, she stared at an email from Terrence Williams, a regional manager with 20 years at SkyEdge. Ms. Gonzalez. While your enthusiasm is commendable, your latest advocacy recommendations demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of operational realities. Perhaps with more industry experience, you'd appreciate the complexities involved. I've adjusted the implementation timeline for my region accordingly. Regards, Terrence. It wasn't the first such message. Despite official support from the Thompsons, Maria encountered constant reminders that many viewed her as an unqualified beneficiary of circumstance, someone who'd filmed a viral video and lucked into an executive position. Her phone rang. It was her mother, Elena. Mija, it's late. You're still working, Maria sighed. Just dealing with some pushback. Nothing I can't handle. The airline people don't respect you, Elena stated matter-of-factly. It wasn't a question. Some do. Others? Maria trailed off. Others see a young Latina with no aviation experience and think you don't belong, her mother finished. Just like that gate agent who made me prove my first-class ticket was real. 7 years earlier, Elena Gonzalez had saved for months to buy first-class tickets to Puerto Rico, wanting her daughter to experience luxury travel just once. The gate agent had humiliated her, demanding multiple forms of verification before finally reluctantly allowing them to board. That's why this matters so much to me, Maria said quietly. But sometimes I wonder if they're right. I don't have the background everyone else has. You have something better, Elena insisted. You have the perspective of the passenger. Those aviation veterans have forgotten what it feels like to be on the other side. The next morning, Maria arrived early for the regional directors meeting. As the newest and youngest person in the room, she'd typically waited for others to speak first. Today would be different. When Terrence Williams began explaining why passenger advocacy implementation should be regionalized and customized corporate speak for delayed and diluted, Maria interrupted. I've reviewed the data from your region, Mr. Williams. Despite having the highest number of discrimination complaints last quarter, you've implemented the fewest changes. Williams looked startled. As I explained in my email, Your email suggested I lack experience. Maria continued. You're right. I don't have 20 years in aviation, but I have something equally valuable data. She distributed a document to everyone present. This shows complaint rates, resolution timeframes, and implementation metrics across all regions. Yours ranks last in every category. The room fell silent as directors reviewed the numbers. These metrics weren't created for blame. Maria added, her voice softening slightly. They're tools for improvement. I'm happy to work directly with your team on implementation challenges if that would help. Williams's face flushed with embarrassment, then surprise, as Zoe Thompson walked into the meeting. Sorry I'm late, Zoe said, taking a seat beside Maria. I see Ms. Gonzalez has already started the metrics review. Excellent. It wasn't a coincidence. Maria had texted Zoe the night before sharing Williams's email and asking for guidance. Rather than fighting her battle, Zoe had simply shown up a clear signal of where the power lay. The meeting proceeded with a markedly different tone. By the end, even Williams had committed to specific implementation targets with clear deadlines. As they left, Zoe touched Maria's arm. Nicely handled, especially the offer to help rather than just criticizing. I almost didn't say anything, Maria admitted. Imposter syndrome hits hard sometimes. I know the feeling. Zoe smiled. Remember what you told me when we first discussed this role, that passengers needed an advocate who understood their perspective. That's exactly why you're the right person, not despite your background, but because of it. Over the following weeks, Maria developed a dual approach, rigorous data tracking to satisfy the aviation veterans, combined with personal passenger stories that no one could dismiss. She created regional scorecards that recognized improvement, not just shortcomings, giving managers positive incentives for implementation. When she visited Williams's region to conduct training personally, she was surprised to find him waiting at the gate. Ms. Gonzalez. He nodded stiffly. I owe you an apology for my email. It was unprofessional and unwarranted. Thank you, she replied simply. I still have concerns about some aspects of the protocol, he continued. But your metrics review was illuminating. I hadn't realized how much room for improvement we had. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was progress. And progress, Maria was learning, came in increments, not revolutions. By her 6th month, Maria had earned a reputation for both empathy and rigor, understanding passenger experiences while demanding measurable improvements. The livestream girl label had faded, replaced by data-driven advocate. When Olivia Thompson promoted her to Vice President of Customer Experience, the announcement received unanimous support from the regional directors, including Terrence Williams. 4 months after the Gate 42 incident, Zoe Thompson found herself in a situation she hadn't anticipated, sitting cross-legged on the floor of Dubai International Airport's first-class lounge, surrounded by SkyEdge's Middle East management team. The Thompson Protocol fundamentally conflicts with local cultural expectations, explained Ahmed Al-Faisal, Regional Director for the Gulf Cooperation Council markets. Our premium passengers here expect differential treatment based on status. It's not discrimination, it's cultural respect. SkyEdge's rapid international expansion had brought the Thompson Protocol to 27 countries, each with unique challenges. But nowhere were the cultural tensions more pronounced than in the Middle East, where the airline's growing presence competed with Qatar Airways, Emirates, and Etihad carriers, known for service stratification based on fare class. Explain the specific conflict. Zoe requested maintaining the informal floor seating that Ahmed had suggested, as more conducive to honest conversation than the conference room's hierarchical table arrangement. In Western markets, the protocol emphasizes treating all passengers with equal dignity, regardless of appearance, Ahmed elaborated. But here, visible recognition of status is essential to dignity. When we treat a sheikh the same as other passengers, it's perceived as disrespect, not equality. Noor Haddad, Dubai station manager, added, "We had an incident last week. A member of a royal family was addressed by name but not given the customary honorific. He complained directly to the Ministry of Transport, suggesting his treatment reflected anti-Arab bias." Zoe had encountered similar issues in Japan, where gate agents struggled with the protocol's emphasis on eye contact, as respectful engagement directly conflicting with cultural norms that considered prolonged eye contact intrusive or confrontational. In India, the protocol's prohibition on preferential treatment had clashed with deeply ingrained VIP culture, where government officials and celebrities expected expedited service as a matter of course. "The protocol isn't working here as designed," Ahmed stated directly. "We're alienating premium passengers while creating anxiety among our staff who feel caught between corporate policy and cultural competence." This was the conversation Zoe had flown 7,500 miles to have, not the carefully worded emails or diplomatically phrased video conferences, but the unvarnished truth about implementation challenges. "The protocol's core principle isn't standardization," Zoe clarified. "It's preventing discrimination. The specific implementations can and should vary based on cultural context." She outlined a new approach, cultural contextualization framework, that would maintain the protocol's anti-discrimination principles while allowing regional adaptations for cultural specificity. In the Gulf region, honorifics and status recognition aren't inherently discriminatory if they're applied consistently based on objective criteria like membership in VVIP programs or diplomatic status rather than subjective assessments of who looks important. The team worked through specific adaptations, formal honorific usage guidelines based on documented status, not appearance, maintaining traditional greeting protocols while ensuring no passenger experienced exclusion, creating objective criteria for enhanced service offerings that aligned with cultural expectations without enabling bias. "The goal isn't to impose Western norms," Zoe emphasized. "It's to ensure that no passenger faces discrimination based on how they look while respecting cultural differences in service expectations." Similar cultural adaptations were developed for Asian markets, where the protocol's Western emphasis on direct communication sometimes created discomfort for both staff and passengers. In Japanese operations, the protocol was modified to incorporate appropriate forms of respectful acknowledgement that didn't require prolonged eye contact. In India, clear guidelines differentiated between legitimate diplomatic protocol requirements and subjective preferential treatment. The international adaptations revealed a deeper truth about the Thompson Protocol. Its effectiveness depended not on rigid standardization, but on flexible application of core principles, objective criteria rather than subjective assessment, consistent application of standards, dignity as defined within cultural context, elimination of appearance-based assumptions. 6 months after implementation, SkyEdge released case studies from 3 international markets demonstrating how the protocol had been successfully adapted while maintaining its anti-discrimination core. The Dubai case study became particularly influential, showing how traditional status recognition could be maintained while eliminating the subjective gatekeeping that had previously excluded passengers who didn't look the part of premium travelers. 6 months and 3 days after the Gate 42 incident, Barbara Reynolds sat nervously in the back row of a crowded auditorium at the National Aviation Service Conference in Chicago. On stage, Zoe Thompson was delivering the keynote address about the Thompson Protocol's implementation across the industry. Barbara had spent the past half-year rebuilding her life from the wreckage of that fateful night. Her role as an accountability ambassador for SkyEdge had evolved from reluctant testimony to passionate advocacy. She had spoken to over 2,000 airline employees about her journey from discrimination to awareness, her story serving as both warning and pathway to change. Still, She had never encountered Zoe Thompson directly since that night at JFK. Their paths had been carefully kept separate by HR, both to avoid discomfort and to prevent any appearance of retaliation or coercion. As Zoe concluded her presentation to enthusiastic applause, Barbara slipped out a side door. She had attended to learn not to intrude on Zoe's moment or create an awkward situation. In the quiet hallway outside, Barbara checked her phone for the schedule of her next session, a panel discussion on frontline implementation of inclusive service standards, where she would share her experiences. Ms. Reynolds. Barbara froze at the sound of the familiar voice. She turned slowly to find Zoe Thompson standing just a few feet away, her expression unreadable. Ms. Thompson. Barbara managed her voice barely audible. I didn't mean to. I should go. Actually, Zoe said calmly, I was hoping we might have a conversation. If you're willing. Barbara nodded mutely, still processing this unexpected encounter. They found a small meeting room nearby, empty during the lunch break. For a moment they sat in awkward silence. The former gate manager and the airline executive, whose lives had collided so dramatically 6 months earlier. Maria Gonzalez tells me you're doing remarkable work in the Accountability Ambassador program, Zoe finally said. The feedback from your sessions has been overwhelmingly positive. Barbara looked down at her hands. It's the least I can do. After what happened. That's actually why I wanted to speak with you. Zoe interrupted gently. I've been following your progress, and I've watched recordings of your presentations. Your transformation appears genuine. It is, Barbara said quietly. I've had to face parts of myself I never wanted to acknowledge, biases I denied having, assumptions I made automatically. Zoe nodded. That kind of self-reflection takes courage. Not as much courage as what you showed that night, Barbara replied. I've often wondered, how did you stay so calm? I was horrible to you. Zoe considered the question carefully. Practice, she finally said. As a black woman in corporate America, I've had years of practice controlling my reactions to bias, but also purpose. I knew that documenting what happened might create an opportunity for change. It did more than that, Barbara acknowledged. It transformed an entire industry, and it certainly transformed me. For the next 30 minutes, they talked openly about the incident and its aftermath. Barbara described her shock at being publicly fired, the financial hardship that followed, and her initial anger at being made an example. Zoe shared her own experience, the humiliation of having her belongings thrown on the floor, the familiar weight of being seen as not belonging, and the mixed feelings about her mother's intervention. The hardest part, Barbara admitted, was explaining to my son what I'd done, showing him the video that everyone at his university had already seen, watching his face as he realized his mother was the airport Karen everyone was talking about. How did he react? Zoe asked. Better than I deserved. Barbara said, her eyes filling with tears. He told me he still loved me, but he was disappointed. That hurt more than losing my job. And now, he's proud of the work I'm doing, says I'm teaching other people what he had to teach me. The conversation shifted to the broader impact of the Thompson Protocol. Barbara shared insights from her perspective as someone implementing the changes at the ground level. Zoe discussed the challenges of maintaining momentum as the initial publicity faded. As their time drew to a close, Barbara asked the question that had haunted her for months. Do you forgive me? Zoe didn't answer immediately. When she did, her response was thoughtful rather than automatic. Forgiveness suggests this was primarily a personal injury requiring personal healing, she said. What happened between us was significant, but it was also symptomatic of something much larger. The more important question isn't whether I forgive you, but whether we're both committed to fixing the systems that enabled that moment. She continued. Based on your work these past 6 months, I believe you are. So perhaps instead of forgiveness, What we share is purpose, making sure others don't experience what happened at Gate 42. Barbara nodded, understanding the wisdom in this perspective. Thank you for that. It's more meaningful than a simple, "I forgive you" could ever be. As they prepared to return to their respective conference sessions, Zoe offered a final thought. 6 months ago, we were on opposite sides of a confrontation that neither of us planned. Today, we're aligned in working toward the same goal. That's not forgiveness, that's progress. They parted with a handshake, not friends perhaps, but no longer adversaries. Their unexpected reunion hadn't erased what happened, but it had affirmed that transformation was possible, both for individuals and for the systems they inhabited. Later that afternoon, Barbara delivered her most powerful presentation, yet sharing the story of her conversation with Zoe. The audience, airline employees from across the country, listened in stunned silence as she described the journey from being the face of discrimination to becoming an advocate for change. 6 months ago, I was the problem, she concluded. Today, I'm part of the solution. If I can change, anyone can. And if anyone can change, then entire systems can transform. 1 year to the day after the Gate 42 incident, SkyEdge Airlines held a ceremony at JFK Terminal 3 to unveil a small plaque beside the boarding area. The inscription read simply, "From this spot, a movement for dignity in air travel began. May all who pass through these gates be treated with the respect they deserve." The metrics of transformation were impressive. Discrimination complaints down 96%, company-wide. Customer satisfaction at historic highs. And the Thompson Protocol, now implemented by every major carrier in North America and Europe. But the true measure of change was visible in the mundane interactions throughout the terminal gate agents, greeting passengers with genuine warmth, regardless of appearance, travelers moving through security with dignity intact, and a culture where belonging was no longer determined by clothing color or class. Maria Gonzalez, recently promoted to Vice President of Customer Experience, stood beside Zoe as they observed the quiet revolution they had helped create. "Sometimes, I still can't believe it all started with one live stream," she marveled. "It started long before that," Zoe replied. "It started with every person who ever experienced discrimination and wished for change. We just created the system that finally made it possible." As they turned to leave, they passed a young black girl in a Stanford hoodie boarding a flight with confidence and without challenge. The future they had worked so hard to build embodied in one simple, unremarkable moment of belonging. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear about dignity and transformation. Your support helps us continue to tell powerful stories about justice, resilience, and positive change. Have you ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation. Remember, real change happens when we all stand up for dignity, whether we have a CEO title or not.